February 14, 1944. London. Thaddeus Marlowe holds a piece of paper. 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches. Red. Not the red of warning signs or stop lights. Deeper. The red of banknotes. The red of things that matter. 80 grams per square meter. He can feel the weight. Thick enough to survive rain. Thick enough to survive mud. Thick enough to survive a 20,000-foot drop from a bomber flying through flak over enemy territory. The borders are ornate. Engraving so precise it rivals the work done at the Bank of England. Curves and flourishes that say, this is official. This is important. This is real. 2 seals at the top. The American eagle on the left, wings spread, talons gripping arrows and olive branches. The British lion on the right, crown above its head, paw raised. Between them, text in German. Text in English. Simple words. Direct promises. At the bottom, a signature. Not stamped. Not printed. Reproduced with such precision that Marlowe can almost see the pen pressure. The slight variation in ink where the hand paused. The humanity behind the mark. Dwight Eisenhower's signature. This piece of paper will be reproduced 6 billion times. Marlowe is 47 years old. Brigadier General. Born in Mattoon, Illinois on March 4, 1897. Joined the Philippine Constabulary at 19. Made infantry second lieutenant during the Great War. Spent 27 years learning one fundamental truth: war is simple. You identify the objective. You apply force. You win or you die. Nothing in his training prepared him for this. The room is cold. The bunker beneath Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force sits under layers of sandbags and concrete and steel. Outside, London shivers through another winter of war. V-2 rockets fall at random. Buildings collapse. People die. The killing continues while men in underground rooms push pins across maps and argue about the future. Inside, 3 men stand in the half-light of a planning table. Marlowe commands 2,300 personnel. Office of War Information. Office of Strategic Services. Political Warfare Executive. British Ministry of Information. A polyglot organization held together by shared purpose and the absolute necessity of winning before the whole world burns. He believes in discipline. Order. Clear chains of command. He understands artillery tables and logistics and the calculus of acceptable casualties. What he doesn't understand is Madison Avenue. The man across the table speaks a different language. Charles Whitmore. 42 years old. Born March 16, 1902 in New York City. Princeton graduate, class of 24. Time Incorporated since 1931. Before the war, he sold magazines. During the war, he served in Turkey. Watched Axis propaganda up close. Saw how the Germans used print and radio to manipulate entire populations. Now he's applying those lessons in reverse. Whitmore looks at war the way an advertiser looks at a market. The Germans aren't the enemy. They're the audience. The challenge isn't to kill them. It's to change their minds. Marlowe finds this perspective disturbing. War should be simple. Honorable. You fight with weapons, not psychology. But the numbers don't lie. 5 million German soldiers remain in the field. Every mile forward costs American lives. Every town, every river, every forest, paid for in body bags and telegrams to mothers. At this rate, the war could drag into 1946. Maybe longer. Whitmore paces. He always paces when he's thinking. His mind works in Madison Avenue rhythms. Headlines. Slogans. The perfect pitch. The Germans like things official, Whitmore says. His voice carries the confidence of a man who has spent 15 years convincing people to buy things they don't need. Formal. Orderly. Even in chaos, even in defeat, they want paperwork. They want stamps. They want something that looks important. He stops pacing. Looks directly at Marlowe. We give them exactly what they want. A piece of paper that looks like a stock certificate. Seals. Signatures. The whole production. Make it so official they can't help but believe it. Marlowe considers this. Every instinct says it's manipulation. Dishonest. But war itself is dishonest. The question isn't whether to manipulate. The question is whether manipulation saves American lives. Factualism, Marlowe says finally. The word tastes strange in his mouth. Everything must be true. 100%. If we lie once, we lose all credibility. Whitmore nods. Agreed. We promise good treatment. Food. Medical care. Safety. And we deliver. Every time. The truth is our weapon. The proposal sits on the table between them. Marlowe has read it 3 times. Each time, the scale makes him dizzy. 6 billion leaflets. Not 6 million. Not 600 million. 6 billion. The largest printing operation in military history. 80% of Britain's offset printing capacity. Millions of pounds of paper. Specialized inks. Engraving that rivals banknotes. And Eisenhower's signature on every single leaflet. His name. His word. His credibility. If the Germans don't surrender, it proves psychological warfare is worthless. Worse than worthless. A distraction from real fighting. A waste of resources that could have gone to bullets and bombs. The third man in the room has been silent. Listening. Calculating. Dwight Eisenhower. 54 years old. Supreme Commander. The weight of the entire European theater on his shoulders. He has a letter on his desk. It arrived months ago from Winston Churchill. The words still burn. 80,000 French civilians dead. 80,000. Killed by Allied bombing campaigns designed to soften German defenses before the invasion. Churchill's number. Churchill's warning. Post-war France must be our friend. It is not alone a question of humanitarianism. It is also a question of high state policy. Eisenhower remembers the calculations. Every bomb dropped on a railroad yard or a factory or a bridge killed people who weren't soldiers. People who lived in occupied territory. People who would remember after the war ended. Now the question is sharper. How do you end a war without killing everyone? The conventional answer, you don't. But Eisenhower didn't become Supreme Commander by accepting conventional answers. He looks at the proposal. Looks at the piece of red paper Marlowe holds. Looks at the 2 men who have bet their careers on this idea. If it works, Eisenhower says slowly, it could save hundreds of thousands of lives. He doesn't finish the sentence. Doesn't need to. If it fails, it becomes the most expensive mistake in military history. Eisenhower picks up his pen. February 14, 1944. The gamble is made. Within 2 weeks, printing presses across Britain begin running 24 hours a day. The Safe Conduct Pass takes shape. Red paper. Ornate borders. The seals of the United States and the United Kingdom at the top. Eisenhower's signature at the bottom. The text went through 17 revisions. Every word tested. Every phrase analyzed for maximum impact with minimum resistance. The German soldier who carries this safe conduct is using it as a sign of his genuine wish to give himself up. He is to be disarmed, to be well looked after, to receive food and medical attention as required, and to be removed from the danger zone as soon as possible. Genuine wish. Not surrender. Not defeat. A choice. An act of will. He is to be well looked after. Specific promises. Concrete. Verifiable. Food. Medical attention. Safety. The things soldiers dream about when they're cold and hungry and watching their friends die. Marlowe establishes quality control. This isn't propaganda. This is a contract. And the contract must be perfect. March 1944. London printing plants work through the night. 14 facilities. 847 workers per shift. 3 shifts per day. No breaks. No holidays. Marlowe visits each plant personally. Checks the temperature controls. 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 45%. Paper warps at 50%. Every variable matters. He watches the inspection process. Every 10,000th sheet pulled from the line. Examined under magnification. Compared to the master proof. Reject rate, under 0.1%. One faulty leaflet in 1,000 could undermine the entire operation. Could make a German soldier pick it up, examine it, decide it's fake, throw it away, tell his squad it's Allied propaganda, ignore the next one he sees. Every detail matters. Paper weight. Ink shade. The exact curve of Eisenhower's signature. Get one detail wrong and it's trash. Get every detail right and you create something enemy soldiers will risk execution to possess. Whitmore handles the psychology. The paper weight. The fold. The size. 4 1/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches when folded. Exactly the size to fit in a German uniform pocket without creating a bulge. A soldier can carry it without anyone noticing. Can hide it in his boot. In his helmet. Inside his tunic. Can keep it close. Just in case. The production milestones arrive on Marlowe's desk like clockwork. April, 100 million. May, 300 million. By June 1, 1944, 500 million leaflets sit ready in warehouses across southern England. 500 million promises. 500 million chances. Marlowe stands in one of the warehouses. Boxes stacked floor to ceiling. Each box contains 10,000 leaflets. 50,000 boxes. He does the math. 500 million leaflets. 5 million German soldiers in the field. 100 leaflets for every German soldier. And they've only just begun. The target is 6 billion. 1,200 leaflets for every German soldier. Saturation. Ubiquity. Making it impossible for any German in the field to claim they never saw one. Marlowe picks up a single leaflet from an open box. Holds it in his hand. Feels the weight. 80 grams per square meter. The red paper. The ornate borders. The seals. The signature. It looks official. It feels important. It reads true. For the first time since February 14, Marlowe allows himself to think, this might actually work. But working means something different than he imagined. The leaflet in his hand promises food. Medical care. Safety. Removal from the danger zone. Those promises must be kept. Every single time. Marlowe issues orders to frontline commanders. Any German soldier surrendering with a safe conduct pass receives immediate medical screening. Hot food. Transport away from combat zones within 12 hours. The promises aren't propaganda. They're policy. Written into standing orders. Enforceable. Real. Because if even one soldier surrenders with a pass and gets shot, the whole system collapses. Trust is fragile. Betrayal is forever. By August, 2 billion leaflets. By December, 4 billion. The presses never stop. The workers never rest. Britain's printing capacity now dedicated to paper weapons. Whitmore visits Marlowe's office in late May. D-Day is coming. Everyone knows it. The invasion is imminent. When the first leaflets fall, Whitmore says, the Germans will laugh. They'll call it toilet paper. They'll make jokes. Marlowe nods. He expects this. But they'll pick them up, Whitmore continues. They'll read them. They'll fold them carefully. They'll hide them somewhere safe. Because the paper might be worthless, Marlowe says. Or it might save their lives. June 6, 1944. 0600 hours. Normandy. The largest amphibious invasion in human history begins at dawn. Paratroopers drop into darkness. Gliders crash into hedgerows. Landing craft hit Omaha Beach and Utah Beach and the killing starts. Men die on the sand. Men drown in the surf. Men burn inside tanks. The price of every yard measured in blood. While this happens, 10,000 feet above the battlefield, B-17 flying fortresses of the 8th Air Force fly over German positions inland. Their bomb bays don't carry high explosives. They carry paper. Bundles of red leaflets tumble through the air. Burst at altitude. Scatter on the wind. Fall like snow across Normandy. German soldiers in their bunkers hear the planes. Brace for bombs. Instead, they get promises. 80% of all leaflets come from those bombers. 4.8 billion pieces of paper dropped from aircraft flying through flak and fighters. Crews risking their lives to deliver something that weighs 80 grams per square meter. 10% from RAF flights. 5% from fighter bombers making low passes over German lines. 5% from artillery. The artillery shells are M104 propaganda rounds. Each one carries 1,500 leaflets compressed and spring-loaded. Released by explosion into a cloud of paper. By the end of June, 900 of these shells have been fired in the 1st Army sector alone. Each shell bursts at 1,000 feet. Dispersion radius, 200 meters. The explosion scorches some leaflets. Tears others. Some land in mud or water and dissolve. But enough survive. Enough reach German hands. The Germans call them propaganda shells. Mock them. Tell each other it's toilet paper. Make jokes. But they pick them up. Read them. Fold them carefully. Hide them in their pockets. Their boots. Inside their helmets. Because the paper might be worthless. Or it might save their lives. And in war, that's not a decision you make lightly. August 1944. Marlowe sits in his office. Door closed. A stack of reports on his desk. Forward interrogation reports from prisoner of war camps across France. Standard procedure. Every captured German soldier questioned. Name, rank, unit, how they were captured. Then they ask about the leaflets. Marlowe reads the first report. Doesn't believe it. Reads it again. Checks the methodology. Confirms the sample size. The number holds. 77% of German prisoners of war say they read at least one Allied leaflet before surrendering. 77%. Marlowe reads the report a third time. His hands are shaking slightly. He sets the paper down. Picks it up. Reads again. Then he finds the detail that changes everything. 80% of prisoners taken on the Brest Peninsula had leaflets in their possession when captured. Not nearby. Not dropped recently. In their pockets. In their boots. Inside their tunics. They were carrying them. On purpose. Deliberately. The interrogation reports include specific incidents. Stories that read like fiction but arrive with verification from multiple sources. Incident report. August 15. American lines near St. Malo. 3 German soldiers approach. Walking slowly. Hands raised. No weapons visible. They're not waving a white flag. They're holding a single piece of red paper. Each man grips one corner. Like they're carrying something precious. Something fragile that might tear if handled carelessly. American soldiers check them for weapons. Find none. Ask about the paper. We have the document, one of the Germans says in broken English. It is official. The interrogator's notes are precise. Clinical. But Marlowe can read between the lines. 3 men. 1 leaflet. They shared it because only one of them found a leaflet but all 3 wanted to surrender. So they compromised. 1 corner each. The 3rd man walking in the middle to make sure everyone could hold it. Marlowe sits with this for a long time. These weren't soldiers who stumbled into American lines by accident. They weren't cut off or surrounded or out of options. They chose. They planned. They walked to the enemy with a piece of paper they believed would keep them alive. And they were right. Another report. Different sector. Different date. A German soldier surrenders alone. Walks into American lines during a lull in fighting. Officers check him for intelligence. Ask the standard questions. The soldier reaches inside his jacket. Pulls out the safe conduct pass. Points to the signature at the bottom. I have a document, he says in careful German. Bearing the personal signature of General Eisenhower. He says it with pride. Like he's presenting credentials. Like the paper makes him official. Protected. Safe. The Americans treat him according to the promises on the leaflet. Food. Medical screening. Transport to a prisoner of war compound behind the lines. Within 24 hours, he's eating hot rations and sleeping in a tent instead of a foxhole. Word spreads. Not through official channels. Through the grapevine that exists in every war. Soldier to soldier. The Americans keep their promises. The leaflet works. If you surrender with the paper, they take care of you. By October 1944, the official tally confirms what the stories suggest. 77% of German prisoners read the leaflets. 80% carried them. The safe conduct pass is working. Marlowe reports to Eisenhower. The meeting is brief. Eisenhower asks one question. Is it real? Marlowe doesn't hesitate. Yes, sir. It's real. But real for whom? And at what cost? Because here's what the statistics don't tell. Every German who surrendered because of a leaflet made a choice his officers would call treason. Every promise kept by the Americans proved that the enemy could be trusted more than the Führer. Every piece of red paper in a German soldier's pocket was a small betrayal. A crack in the foundation of loyalty. November 1944. Intelligence reports arrive from forward interrogation units. A German major, recently captured, sits for questioning. Standard questions first. Name, rank, unit. Then the interrogator asks about psychological warfare. About Allied leaflets. About the safe conduct pass specifically. The major speaks with surprising candor. The interrogator will note later that the prisoner seemed relieved to talk. Like he'd been carrying something heavy and finally found someone to share the weight. The safe conduct pass was the most effective Allied leaflet I saw during the war, the major says. In my opinion, if captivity was really as good as the leaflet promised, it was much better to surrender than to fight on. The interrogator makes notes. Asks the obvious follow-up question. But you didn't surrender voluntarily. No, the major says. I did not become a prisoner voluntarily. The transcript arrives on Marlowe's desk 3 weeks later. He reads it in his office. Alone. Door closed. 2 in the morning. The major is right. The Safe Conduct Pass is effective. It works. It convinces German soldiers that surrender is better than death. That's exactly what it's designed to do. But the major didn't surrender. He kept fighting until he was captured. Until the choice was taken from him. So did the leaflet save his life? Or just plant a seed of doubt that made him less effective as a soldier? Less willing to die for a cause he no longer believed in? Marlowe has served for 27 years. Rose from second lieutenant to brigadier general. Learned that soldiers are defined by duty. By honor. By the willingness to follow orders even when those orders lead to death. Now he's in the business of breaking that bond. Making enemy soldiers doubt. Question. Choose survival over duty. He thinks about the boys on Omaha Beach. The paratroopers who landed in darkness and died in hedgerows. The tank crews who burned alive in Normandy. Every American soldier who died because a German soldier chose duty over survival. How many of those deaths could have been prevented if more Germans had chosen survival over duty? How many American boys came home because a piece of red paper convinced their enemies to quit? The mathematics are brutal. But they're clear. Charles Whitmore finds Marlowe in his office that night. Doesn't knock. Just walks in. Sits down across from him. You're thinking about honor, Whitmore says. Not a question. A statement. Marlowe looks up. Doesn't deny it. We're giving them a choice, Whitmore continues. That's more than Hitler ever gave anyone. More than the SS gives their own men. We're saying, you can live. You can go home. You can survive this war. By betraying their oaths, Marlowe says. By choosing life over death in a war they can't win. That's not betrayal. That's wisdom. Marlowe wants to argue. Wants to defend the idea that honor matters more than survival. That duty must be absolute or it means nothing. But he can't. Because he knows Whitmore is right. The war is lost for Germany. Every German soldier who dies between now and the end dies for nothing. Dies because honor demanded it. And honor, Marlowe realizes, is a luxury the defeated cannot afford. He thinks about the 3 soldiers sharing one leaflet. The major who believed the promises but kept fighting until capture took the choice away. The thousands of Germans who picked up the pass, read it, folded it carefully, and hid it somewhere safe. Just in case. They're not traitors. They're survivors. Men who want to live long enough to go home. To see their families. To rebuild from the ashes of a war they never wanted. The Safe Conduct Pass gives them permission. Makes surrender official. Honorable. A choice sanctioned by the highest authority they can imagine. The signature of the Supreme Commander himself. How many? Marlowe asks finally. Whitmore knows what he's asking. Nearly 6 billion. By the time this is over. Marlowe does the math in his head. 6 billion leaflets. 5 million German soldiers. Over 1,000 leaflets per soldier. Saturation. Ubiquity. No German in the field can claim they never saw one. Every soldier has been given the choice. Multiple times. In multiple ways. What they do with that choice is on them. Then new reports arrive. Reports that Marlowe never expected. Reports that will change how he understands the entire operation. December 1944. Interrogation reports from different sources. Not German soldiers. Holocaust survivors. Concentration camp inmates. Resistance fighters. People who saw the leaflets from a different angle. Who understood their impact in ways the planners never imagined. The testimony arrives in fragments. Scattered accounts from people who survived horrors that defy description. But the pattern emerges. Clear. Undeniable. The Safe Conduct Pass didn't just encourage German soldiers to surrender. It saved lives in the camps. Marlowe reads the first report 3 times. Can't process what it's saying. SS guards received strict orders. Picking up Allied leaflets meant death. Shot on sight. No exceptions. The SS wanted absolute loyalty. Total commitment. No contamination from enemy propaganda. But the leaflets fell everywhere. In camps. In ghettos. In the forests where prisoners worked as slave labor. They fell like snow. Impossible to avoid. Impossible to ignore. Some prisoners picked them up. Hid them in their clothes. Read them in secret. Passed them among trusted friends. The leaflet had different text for different audiences. Some versions addressed the guards directly. We know you are holding prisoners. If you harm them, you will be executed on the spot when we liberate this area. Do not hurt them. Direct. Clear. A promise and a threat. German guards read them too. Found them on the ground. In the barracks. Brought to them by informers or collaborators. They read the words. Saw Eisenhower's signature. Understood the message. The SS might shoot you for reading Allied propaganda. But the Americans would shoot you for killing prisoners. Some guards made calculations. Started treating prisoners better. Not out of compassion. Out of self-preservation. Planning for the day when the Americans arrived and judgments would be rendered. One survivor remembers it clearly. Spring 1945. American planes flew low over the camp. Dropped leaflets in broad daylight. The SS ordered everyone to ignore them. Threatened death for anyone who picked one up. But a woman ran into the forest. Retrieved a leaflet. Read it. Showed it to others in secret. It said they knew about us, the survivor recalls in testimony years later. It said the Germans would be punished if they hurt us. It gave us hope. After so long without hope, it gave us something. Another survivor describes watching planes drop leaflets over a death march. Thousands of prisoners being forced through mountains. Guards shooting anyone who couldn't keep pace. Bodies left on the roadside. Then the planes came. Low enough to see the markings. American. Not dropping bombs. Dropping paper. The guards became nervous. Not as strict as before. Some of them talked about the leaflets. About what would happen when the Americans arrived. A few guards even helped prisoners who were weak. Shared water. Allowed rest breaks. Things they never did before. The leaflets changed the mathematics for everyone. Not just soldiers deciding whether to fight or surrender. Guards deciding whether to follow orders or preserve their own lives. Prisoners deciding whether to endure one more day. Marlowe reads these testimonies after the war. Sits in his office in occupied Germany with reports spread across his desk. Stories from survivors. Evidence that the psychological warfare campaign did more than convince soldiers to surrender. It saved people in the camps. Not everyone. Not enough. But some. How many? Impossible to calculate. Impossible to know which guard refrained from pulling a trigger because of a leaflet. Which prisoner survived because a guard showed mercy after reading Eisenhower's warning. But it happened. Multiple sources confirm it. Independent testimonies from people who never met. Who survived different camps. Different marches. Different horrors. All telling the same story. The leaflets mattered. The promises reached beyond soldiers. The words saved lives in ways the planners never imagined. Marlowe picks up one of the safe conduct passes from his desk. Red paper. Eisenhower's signature. The promise in German and English. Genuine wish. Those two words meant something different than he thought. Not just about soldiers choosing to surrender. About everyone choosing mercy over murder. Hope over despair. Life over death. The leaflet gave them permission to make that choice. And enough people chose wisely to matter. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Germany surrenders. Unconditionally. The war in Europe ends. Church bells ring across London. Celebrations fill the streets. Soldiers embrace. Strangers dance. The killing stops. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, the atmosphere is quieter. Relieved. Exhausted. The kind of tired that comes from carrying weight so long you forget what it feels like to stand up straight. The Psychological Warfare Division begins shutting down. Personnel reassigned. Files boxed. Equipment catalogued. The massive printing operation that consumed 80% of Britain's offset capacity winds down to nothing. The leaflets stop falling. The promises stop scattering across battlefields. The war of paper ends with the war of bullets. Marlowe sits in his office. Final report on his desk. 5,978,000,000 leaflets dropped over Europe between June 1944 and May 1945. 80% of Britain's printing capacity for 11 months. 77% of German prisoners read the leaflets before surrendering. 80% carried them when captured. Cost, £2.3 million. Compare that to £180 million for the bombing campaign. Thousands of individual testimonies. Thousands of stories about men who chose life. Somewhere between those statistics and stories lives the truth. The safe conduct pass worked. Not perfectly. Not universally. But it worked. Eisenhower's gamble paid off. 6 billion pieces of paper. 6 billion promises. 6 billion chances to choose survival. And enough Germans took the chance to matter. Marlowe picks up one of the passes from his desk. 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches. 80 grams per square meter. Red paper fading slightly now. But the signature still clear. The promise still readable. Physical evidence that once, 3 men bet paper could be stronger than bullets. And they were right. But being right doesn't mean the lesson will be remembered. January 1946. Marlowe writes a letter to the War Department. The letter is formal. Measured. But urgent underneath the military prose. The ignorance about psychological warfare among military personnel even now is astounding. We fought this war with psychological weapons that proved their worth. Now we're throwing away that capability like it never mattered. He explains the statistics. The prisoner interrogations. The evidence that psychological warfare saved American lives. Shortened the war. Reduced casualties on both sides. He requests that psychological warfare be integrated into military training. That doctrine be written. That capability be preserved for the next war. Because there will be a next war. The Soviet Union is not an ally. It's a competitor. An adversary waiting for the right moment. When that moment comes, America needs to be ready to fight with words as well as weapons. The War Department sends a response. Thanks him for his input. Professional. Polite. Files the letter. Does nothing. Marlowe watches the demobilization accelerate. Budget cuts continue. The psychological warfare capability that operated in 1945 begins to dissolve. Trained personnel returned to civilian life. Their expertise scattered to insurance companies and advertising agencies and universities. The institutional knowledge evaporates. June 1947. Marlow tries again. This time he goes directly to his old commander. General Dwight Eisenhower. Now Chief of Staff of the United States Army. The man whose signature appeared on 6 billion leaflets. Who bet his credibility on the power of psychological warfare. The memo is direct. Blunt. Psychological warfare must become part of every future war plan. We cannot allow this capability to disappear again. Eisenhower reads it. Agrees with it. Sends it forward with his endorsement. The bureaucracy absorbs it. Acknowledges it. Largely ignores it. November 1947. Marlow provides Eisenhower with a list. Names of former Psychological Warfare Division staff members. People who understand the field. Who could form the core of a reserve capability. Keep the knowledge alive even if the active duty capability dissolves. Eisenhower files the list. Promises to use it when the time comes. But the time doesn't come. The budget cuts continue. The demobilization accelerates. The institutional knowledge scatters. By 1949, the psychological warfare capability that existed in 1945 barely exists. Only the Army Reserve maintains any real competence. Marlow watches it happen. Fights where he can. Writes memos. Makes phone calls. Tries to preserve what they built. But he's fighting institutional gravity. And gravity always wins. He sits in his office late at night. Alone. Reading through files that will soon be archived and forgotten. The reports about 3 soldiers sharing one leaflet. The major who believed but kept fighting. The Holocaust survivors who found hope in paper promises. All of it documented. All of it verified. All of it true. And all of it being forgotten. Marlow is 53 years old. 29 years of service. He has seen this before. After the Great War, the psychological warfare capability that existed in 1918 vanished. Dismantled. Forgotten. Lost to budget cuts and peacetime indifference. Now it's happening again. The same institutional amnesia. The same assumption that psychological warfare only matters during war. That in peacetime, bullets and bombs are enough. It's wrong. Dangerously wrong. But Marlow is one general among many. One voice among thousands. And peacetime has its own priorities. June 25, 1950. North Korea invades South Korea. The Cold War turns hot. American soldiers deploy to fight communism on the Korean peninsula. And the army discovers, once again, that it has no psychological warfare capability. No trained personnel. No doctrine. No equipment. No institutional memory of what worked in the last war. They have to rebuild from scratch. Relearn lessons that were known in 1945 and forgotten by 1950. It takes months. Precious months. While soldiers die. While opportunities slip away. While the enemy uses psychological warfare and America struggles to respond. Marlow reads the reports from Korea. Sits in his office. 53 years old. 4 years of pushing bureaucratic rocks uphill. 4 years of watching his warnings come true. Every casualty report is a reminder. Every missed opportunity is vindication he never wanted. He tried to tell them. Tried to preserve the capability. Tried to keep the lesson alive. Nobody listened. September 1950. The Army creates a new psychological warfare division. Emergency measure. Crisis response. They need someone to run it. Someone who knows the field. Who has experience. Who can rebuild the capability quickly? There's only one name on the short list. Thaddeus Marlowe. 53 years old. They call him to Washington. Offer him the job. He doesn't want it. Doesn't want to rebuild what should never have been dismantled. Doesn't want to prove again what was already proven. But American soldiers are dying. And psychological warfare might save them. So he takes the job. Not because he wants it. Because no one else can do it. January 1951. Marlowe becomes Chief of the Office of Psychological Warfare. A new position. Created specifically because the Korean War proved the necessity. He begins rebuilding. Activating units. Writing doctrine. Training personnel. Creating the Psychological Warfare Center at Fort Bragg. Establishing the foundation for what will eventually become U.S. Army Special Warfare. It's everything he tried to preserve in 1946. Everything he begged the Army to maintain. Now being reassembled piece by piece at emergency speed. While soldiers die. The waste eats at him. 4 years lost. Capability discarded. Knowledge scattered. Now being reassembled because crisis demands it. But he does the work. Because that's what soldiers do. They complete the mission regardless of cost. He works late nights. Writes training manuals. Approves curriculum. Reviews personnel files. Builds from memory what should have been preserved institutionally. Sometimes he takes out one of the old safe conduct passes. Keeps one in his desk drawer. Red paper faded to pink now. But Eisenhower's signature still visible. Physical reminder of what's possible when you fight with promises instead of bullets. Physical reminder of what gets forgotten when peacetime arrives. 1952. Presidential election year. Dwight Eisenhower runs for president. War hero. Supreme commander. The man who defeated Hitler. His campaign needs someone who understands communication. Psychology. How to shape public perception and win votes. They call Charles Whitmore. Whitmore left Time Life in 1951. Became president of the Free Europe Committee. Running Radio Free Europe. Broadcasting American values behind the Iron Curtain. Psychological warfare against the Soviet Union. The same techniques that worked against Germany now applied to communism. But he takes time to write speeches for Eisenhower's campaign. Applies Madison Avenue methodology to politics. Understands what voters want to hear. How to craft messages that resonate. What promises will persuade. Different audience. Same principles. Psychology doesn't change just because the target wears a suit instead of a uniform. Eisenhower wins. Landslide. Becomes the 34th President of the United States. And in February 1953, he repays Whitmore's service. Special Assistant to the President for Psychological Warfare. A White House position created specifically for Whitmore. His area of responsibility includes international affairs. Cold War planning. Coordinating psychological operations across government agencies. The job makes Whitmore the president's liaison between the CIA and the Pentagon. Between State Department diplomats and military planners. Between the people who fight with bullets and the people who fight with ideas. Everything he learned in London. Everything he developed at Psychological Warfare Division. Now applied at the highest levels of government. 3 men. 3 paths. Now converging again. Eisenhower in the White House. Marlowe rebuilding psychological warfare capability at Fort Bragg. Whitmore coordinating Cold War information operations. The same team that bet on paper leaflets in 1944. Now fighting a different war with the same weapons. Words. Ideas. Psychology. The patient application of persuasion to change minds and shape behavior. Radio Free Europe broadcasts into Soviet satellite states. Voice of America carries American values worldwide. Psychological warfare units deployed to Korea. The techniques developed for the Safe Conduct Pass applied to the Cold War. Factualism. Authenticity. Specific promises. Continuous improvement based on feedback. Different enemy. Different battlefield. Same fundamental truth. What people believe matters more than what weapons they carry. January 1, 1957. Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Thaddeus Marlowe dies of a heart attack. 60 years old. Less than 1 year after retiring from active duty. Brigadier General. Father of U.S. Army Special Warfare. The man who rebuilt what the bureaucracy destroyed. He never saw peace. Fought in World War I. Served between the wars. Led psychological warfare in World War II. Spent his final years preparing for the next war. Died believing that psychological warfare matters. That ideas are weapons. That honor and manipulation can coexist if the cause is just and the promises are kept. The obituaries are respectful but brief. A general died. One of thousands who served. One of hundreds who held important commands. His specific contributions mentioned but not emphasized. The army knows what he did. The people who served under him know. But the broader public doesn't understand. Can't comprehend. Doesn't have the context to appreciate what he built. How do you explain to civilians that a general who never commanded combat troops saved more lives than some who did? That paper and ink can be as important as steel and lead? You can't. Not really. Not in ways they'll understand. So Marlowe's legacy lives in the institution. In the training programs at Fort Bragg. In the doctrine manuals that codify what he learned. In the special forces units that trace their lineage to his vision. But the man himself, largely forgotten outside military circles. One more general who served with distinction and died too soon. September 18, 1964. New York City. Charles Whitmore dies at 62. Heart attack. Like Marlowe. The obituaries mention his civilian accomplishments. Publisher of Life magazine. Presidential advisor. Time Incorporated executive. But they don't mention the psychological warfare. Don't connect the magazine publisher to the man who helped design 6 billion leaflets. Only the files at the Eisenhower Presidential Library preserve that story. March 28, 1969. Washington, D.C. Dwight David Eisenhower dies at 78. His funeral is a national event. State ceremony. Full military honors. The nation mourns. The obituaries mention D-Day. The German surrender. Presidential leadership. 2 terms in the White House. The interstate highway system. The space race. But they don't mention the Safe Conduct Pass. Don't explain how 6 billion promises helped end the war. That's relegated to footnotes. Military history. Specialist knowledge. The lesson that wars can be won with ideas as well as weapons has to be relearned every generation. January 19, 2001. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The United States Army Special Operations Command dedicates its headquarters building. The ceremony is formal. Military precision. Color guard. National anthem. Generals in dress uniform. Speeches about heritage and mission and the legacy of those who served. The building receives a name. Marlowe Hall. Named for Brigadier General Thaddeus Marlowe. Father of U.S. Army Special Warfare. The man who understood that winning hearts and minds matters as much as winning battles. The dedication plaque explains his service. Philippine Constabulary. World War I. Psychological Warfare Division in World War II. Rebuilding the capability for Korea. Creating the foundation for modern special operations. It doesn't mention the Safe Conduct Pass specifically. Doesn't explain the 6 billion leaflets or the 77% of prisoners who read them. Doesn't calculate lives saved or battles won without fighting. But the building exists. The name is preserved. The institution remembers even if individuals forget. And somewhere in the archives at Fort Bragg, in climate-controlled storage, a few safe conduct passes survive. Red paper fading to pink. Ornate borders still visible. The seals of 2 nations at the top. Eisenhower's signature at the bottom. Physical evidence that once, in the largest war humanity ever fought, 3 men bet that paper could be stronger than bullets. That promises kept could win hearts. That giving the enemy a choice might save more lives than giving them no choice at all. The gamble paid off. The lesson was forgotten. The capability was lost and rebuilt and lost and rebuilt again. Because institutions have short memories. Bureaucracies resist complexity. And the idea that wars can be won without killing sounds too good to be true. Too naive. Too optimistic for a world that runs on power and violence. But it worked once. Demonstrably. Measurably. 77% of prisoners read the leaflets. 80% carried them. 3 soldiers shared one because they believed it mattered. A German major called it the most effective Allied propaganda he'd seen. 6 billion promises kept. 6 billion chances to choose life. And enough Germans took the chance to matter. Your grandfather came home from World War II. Maybe he was lucky. Maybe he was skilled. Maybe he was blessed. Or maybe, somewhere in France or Belgium or Germany, a German soldier held a piece of red paper. 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches. 80 grams per square meter. Read 6 words at the bottom. Eisenhower promises you are safe. And chose to lay down his weapon instead of pulling the trigger. 77% read the leaflets. 80% carried them when they surrendered. 3 soldiers shared one because they believed it would save their lives. And they were right. That's not manipulation. Not deception. Not corruption of honor. That's giving people a choice between death and life. And trusting that enough will choose life to end a war. Thaddeus Marlowe understood this. Built a system around it. Proved it could work at the largest scale imaginable. Then the institution forgot. The bureaucracy moved on. The next generation had to relearn the lesson in blood. The gamble succeeded. The lesson was forgotten. The capability was lost, rebuilt, lost, rebuilt. Honor and mercy are not opposites. They're partners. And sometimes the most honorable thing you can do is offer your enemy a way to survive. Because war ends. Nations rebuild. Former enemies become allies. And the choices made in crisis echo through generations. The Safe Conduct Pass ended in 1945. But the principle endures. Tell the truth. Keep your promises. Give people a choice. And trust that enough will choose wisely to change the world. Thank you for staying until the very end. I hope today's video gave you some new perspectives. Please support me with a like and a subscribe. See you again soon.